This is a story that involves stalking, psychological torture, alleged sexual abuse, kidnapping, and murder. Listener discretion is advised.
David sent Amy a message that says, prepare yourself to be raising 4 kids by this time next year. The hearing's set for 9 a.m. on Monday morning, February 11th.
She said, I'm scared to death, but I'm going, and it's going to be done.
They embraced. Tom said everything's going to be all right.
It was mass chaos. There were police cars everywhere.
He then turned toward Officer Reinhardt. They both had their guns pointed at each other.
For the courthouse, and all of the courthouse without shots fired.
After enduring relentless stalking, harassment, and a seemingly endless smear campaign at the hands of the Matusewicz family, Christine Belford is determined to escape the unending abuse and live in peace with her daughters. But that means one final hurdle: an in-person child support hearing. When David refuses to pay any amount of back pay on his child support, a hearing is called. Reporter Chris Barish recalls the process David underwent to convince the courts he should be able to attend the mediation in person.
David gets a hearing scheduled to determine his child support, and he's not allowed to leave the state of Texas because he's still early in his probationary period or his parole period. And he petitions for permission to come north to Delaware for a hearing, for a live hearing, and he gets granted.
Though Christine is unnerved about seeing David in person after everything the Matusewicz family had put her through, her sister-in-law, Jenny Puglisi, recalls her feeling hopeful about being able to move on with her life once the mediation was over.
So she came over and she had just started a new job. She looked great. And she says, I feel great. I feel like I'm in the best place I've ever been. I just need to get through this and it'll be smooth sailing. And I said, how do you feel about the court hearing? She said, I'm scared to death, but I'm going because I don't want to be held in contempt. David wants this thing and, I'm just going to go and it's going to be done and we're just going to move on.
For Christine, the idea of facing David is terrifying. But she takes comfort in the fact that the mediation should be a straightforward process. Delaware State Police Sergeant Millard Greer explains Christine's mindset. Despite her fear, she approached the legal proceedings with the hope that, no matter the outcome, it would finally mean an end to her dealings with David and the Matusewicz family once and for all.
She felt it was a very, very routine child support hearing. She actually knew that David probably did not have the income to meet the payment that he was obligated to make for child support. And she didn't feel there was anything that her attorney, Mr. Hitchings, could do for her at that hearing, and she felt she could handle it on her own.
What had happened is that Christine had represented herself at the mediation. That Friday, I called up Christine and said, hey, you sure you don't want me to go in with you on this hearing? And she says, I can handle this. This is a simple issue. It's a mediation.
While attending a child support mediation should be straightforward, Christine knows that when dealing with the Matusewicz family, there's always risk involved. And considering everything she'd been through with David, Christine decides not to go to the courthouse alone. She asks her close friend and neighbor, Beth Mulford, to accompany her for moral support. Katie Moffa, Christine's oldest daughter, can vividly remember Christine leaving for the courthouse that morning.
My mom left the court. I put my sisters on the bus. It was raining, so I had to drive them to the bus stop. And then I didn't want to be home alone because I had a new baby and I knew that David was going to be in town. So I actually took my daughter and went to my grandparents' house.
As Christine makes her way to the courthouse, so too does David. But what no one realizes is that David isn't the only one who's made the trek from Texas to Delaware to attend the child support hearing.
David doesn't say that he's going to be traveling with anybody, which is certainly a violation, but he drives up with his mother and father, and they take two cars. One's a Honda, I think, CRV, and the other one's a sedan. On the February 10th, they stayed with a colleague of David's who lived in Maryland, like, half-hour drive from Wilmington. And the hearing's set for 9 a.m. on Monday morning, February 11th.
In the early morning hours of February 11th, 2013, the white Honda CRV pulls out from the Maryland residence, where David, Lenore, and Tom Matusewicz stayed the night before. Its path is set, the Newcastle County Courthouse. David Matusewicz grips the wheel, his gaze fixed ahead. Through the fog and drizzle, windshield wipers beat back the constant thud of rain. In the seat beside David sits his father, Tom Matusewicz. The city of Wilmington, Delaware is already bustling with commuters as the Newcastle County Courthouse comes into view. The white Honda pulls into a parking lot across the street from the courthouse. It parks in a handicapped space close to the exit. From the surveillance cameras above, David, clad in a long green jacket, is seen conversing with his father, who wears his own checkered jacket and a maroon shirt, as they hurriedly make their way towards the courthouse. As the two exit the garage, rain falls steadily as people file inside. David zips up his jacket and pulls up his hood. He separates from his father and hurries inside. Tom follows behind, limping slightly.
It wasn't 8 a.m. yet, so you weren't allowed to go beyond the lobby. They had to wait in the lobby for a while. David actually got in line, in the stanchion line for going through security. Oddly enough, Tom did not get in line. He stayed outside in basically the public area of the lobby. He walked around for a while. At one point, he came back over to David. According to a witness, they embraced. Tom said, "Everything's going to be all right."
Around 8 a.m., security footage captures Christine Belford, dressed professionally in a long brown pea coat and briefcase, walking side by side with her dear friend Beth Mulford, clad all in black, as they enter the courthouse through the revolving door. The two talk hurriedly to one another, shaking off the rain as they step into the building. Beth is there for one reason: to make sure Christine feels supported in facing the man who's taken so much from her already. The women walk briskly through the main lobby. They're only able to get a couple of feet inside when suddenly, gunfire erupts inside the courthouse as panic screams fill the air.
I'm in the courthouse, in the Wilmington Courthouse. We've got shots fired here.
People scramble in every direction,
I got two hitting the lobby,
desperately seeking cover wherever they can.
Drop it!
Courthouse officers draw their weapons and begin firing at the suspect, who continues shooting. One officer steps forward as he turns and faces the suspect head-on.
The shooter actually struck Corporal Manley. Luckily, he was wearing a ballistic vest that prevented any penetration into his body. Everybody begins to flee from the lobby and take cover.
The shooter continues to return fire, unleashing another barrage towards the courthouse officers.
The shooter then exits the revolving door, and he didn't flee. And once he exited, he actually changed the magazine in his firearm and came back in. At this time, Officer Reinhardt had drawn his weapon and began to approach the door.
The shooter then steps back, once again entering the revolving door.
There was a subject inside of the door. The shooter told him to get out. He then turned toward Officer Reinhardt. They both had their guns pointed at each other.
Drop the gun now!
They both fired at the same time. They literally struck each other almost in the same area of the chest. The difference is Reinhardt was wearing a ballistic vest that did stop the round from the handgun.
But just as Officer Reinhardt's bullet strikes the shooter in the chest, they stumble out of the revolving door and onto the street. The shooter raises a hand, presses the gun into his mouth, and pulls the trigger. His lifeless body collapses at the courthouse entrance. While the shooter is officially down, for law enforcement, the chaos continues. Here's Detective Jeff Schreiner of the Newcastle Police Department, who, coincidentally, had been headed into the courthouse that morning.
The call comes across the police radio about a shooting in the Newcastle County Courthouse. I was only a mile away, so of course I came. It was mass chaos. There were police cars everywhere, police officers running everywhere. And one of the other things that came across the radio, there may be a second shooter. So I went inside the courthouse. First thing that hit me as soon as I got inside the doors was the smell of gun smoke and gunpowder. There were two victims on the floor being worked on by civilians, whoever else would help. So I just took up a position in the lobby. I have no idea who these two people were who had been shot.
All agencies, including the state police, county police, and even the FBI, are called in to assist with what has now become an active shooter investigation.
You had a lot of police agencies that were there because it's the courthouse in Newcastle County. So all of those agencies had put together tactical teams to try to clear the building. At that time, nobody knew if this was just one shooter.
As I'm standing there, one of my captains walked up to me. The captain knew the Matusowitz case, and he said, "That's Christine Belford." And my heart just sank. It really did. My heart just sank.
Despite every effort to save her, Christine Belford dies on the scene. The second victim is identified as Beth Mulford. She, too, tragically succumbs to her injuries.
We figured out that Beth was a family friend, and she had simply come to court that day to provide some moral support.
Beth Mulford was an innocent victim who had been there for Christine, helped care for her children, and provided unwavering support in some of her darkest times. Although the two victims have been positively identified, police still have no idea who the shooter is.
They sent me downstairs to look at the surveillance tape of the shootout. And at that point, the shooter had committed suicide, but hadn't been identified yet. They wanted me to go look and see if I could identify the shooter. So I go to look at the surveillance video, but I couldn't make head or tails of who that was doing the shooting.
Detective Jeff Schreiner continues to pore over the surveillance footage. Upstairs, additional law enforcement have secured a safe enough perimeter around the lobby to conduct a search of the deceased suspect's body. His checkered jacket and maroon shirt are now soaked with blood as his body is splayed out in front of the courthouse steps. an officer locates a wallet in the man's pocket. He pulls out his ID. The name reads Thomas Matusewicz. The Wilmington courthouse is in a state of total mayhem. As law enforcement on scene scramble to organize, news begins spreading like wildfire that a violent shootout has left 2 women dead.
Reports start to trickle out. We sent a reporter to the outskirts of the courthouse, but you couldn't get in. As the morning went on, we knew there were 2 people dead. We got a tip that had something to do with the Matusewicz case. And so my first thought is, well, Christine. And so I called her, no answer. I called her again, no answer. And then 5 minutes later, I called again. And like, she's one of the people who are killed. And like, I'll never, ever, ever forget that. It's just the chilling, and it's just the heartbreaking. It's just the heartbreaking feeling I had to know that, this woman whose ordeal I had chronicled for better part of 6 years and stayed in touch with, was lying under a white sheet in the courthouse lobby.
It doesn't take long for the devastating news to reach Christine's inner circle.
I got the phone call, I was at work, that there was a courthouse shooting, and then there was a hesitation on the phone. It was Christine. And I did not want to believe it.
I just knew. I knew that they weren't going to stop, and I knew that David was there that day, and my mom was there. It just wasn't a coincidence.
So I was home, and I got a call from a friend of mine who said, are you aware of the shooting? And I said, no. And she said, there's been a shooting at the courthouse. So I called over to my mom's house, and Katie picked up. And she said, are you coming over? And I said, I'm coming to get you. When I came into the house, Katie was on the floor with her baby. And she just looked back at me, and she was in tears. And she's like, it's my mom. And I just said, I know.
Back at the courthouse, major news outlets line the street. Police cars barricade intersections, halting traffic as the city grinds to a standstill. Inside, all law enforcement agencies begin to coordinate, working frantically to lock down the building.
By this time, Bill David with the U.S. Marshals had heard what happened and made his way down to the courthouse. So everybody with intimate knowledge of the previous case was there.
When word gets out that Christine is the victim of the shooting, everyone involved with the kidnapping case rushes to the scene. This is personal for them. The sleepless nights, the dead-end leads, the countless phone calls with the distraught Christine seem to have all been in vain. The family they worked so hard to reunite has been viciously torn apart once more. And the family responsible for this tragedy is still at large.
Detective Schreiner said to me, David's in this building.
The very first thing that went through my mind was, where's David?
Having worked the initial kidnapping investigation of the 3 Matusewicz girls, Detective Jeff Schreiner can offer intimate knowledge of the inner workings of the Matusewicz family and knows exactly what kind of high-level threat law enforcement is dealing with.
Knowing the dynamics of this family. I got to know some of the family court judges who worked on the parental rights termination and divorce and all those proceedings. I got to know a couple of those judges. And I was in fear that David was in the courthouse and was going to go looking for them. I didn't know what this family was capable of.
And knowing the training and access that David has to the gun collection that his father had, which was enormous, David still had access to those weapons.
Everything's roped off. There's dozens of police there. I'm calling people that I knew at the courthouse, and they're holed up in their offices, and they're hiding under desks, and they're just like losing their minds.
It was a murder scene. It was an active shooting scene. David was still in the courthouse, and they needed to find him.
In an emergency situation with lives on the line, communication is key. If all of these agencies aren't on the same page, it could have deadly consequences.
Jeff Schreiner facilitated getting David's photo out to every law enforcement officer that was in that building and on a perimeter. So the Fugitive Task Force, we've got experience clearing structures and looking for people.
Jeff Schreiner's experience tells him that David's instinct would be to do what he's always done. Hide in plain sight.
There's a jury room in the downstairs of the courthouse where prospective jurors respond every morning to be selected for jury pools. So that's usually a few hundred people. That was one area that a lot of people were rushed to. A court bailiff that went through that room taking people's names because they were all potential witnesses that may be needed later.
And I said, is there a David Matusowicz? He said, yeah, I just had him. And they just released him.
David has already made it past the first line of defense and is mere steps away from freedom. He never makes the same mistake twice. If he evades capture here and now, he may be gone forever.
So we run over the elevators, and there's David Matusowicz at the base of the elevators getting ready to go out the back door of the courthouse. We yelled to him, David, get up here. And he turned right around and walked through the crowd, came right back upstairs. He walked up the escalator. He was calm, cool, and collected.
If the detectives had been just a minute behind, David would have been in the wind. Adrenaline is running high in the veins of everyone in the courthouse. Everyone except for one person.
David's demeanor never really changed. It was flat. He had a flat affect. He had a blank stare. He would look through any person he was looking at. It was almost as if he wasn't actually there.
I mean, see, I never met David face to face up until that morning. You know, because I didn't go to Nicaragua to help bring him back. I didn't do any of that. And he requested a lawyer, so I couldn't even go interview him when he got back. That was the first time him and I ever looked each other in the eyes. I saw a kidnapper. And now I'm thinking he's a murderer. Even though he didn't pull the trigger, him and his dad were in the courthouse. There was something going on between the two, you know? So I was really kind of in shock that this family went this far. I told a sergeant of our SWAT team, I said, put him in handcuffs. He wasn't argumentative. To me, he didn't even say a word.
David was being held in a courtroom, so I felt it was imperative to quickly try to get some type of interview with him. Talking to David at the courthouse was brief. He eventually did invoke his Miranda rights and requested an attorney. But when he was informed that his father was deceased, there was no reaction, no emotion, no words, no anything, just completely a blank stare. I personally have no doubt that he knew that. It's their belief that it was definitely planned.
Next time on Very Scary People.
This was not a random act. The shooting was not the end.
Aiming Lenore Matusowicz, they're definitely involved in what happened here.
We have to get the girls now. We have to go get the girls right now.
This is a family affair. This is the entire Matusowicz family.
We determined that there was a hit list. If we open the door, potentially is there a bomb in this car?
Very Scary People. is produced by Lionsgate Alternative Television for ID. I'm Donnie Wahlberg. You can follow our show wherever you get your podcasts, and we'd love it if you could take a second to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.